The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Don't adjust your screen. There is nothing wrong. You're about to enter a world where the very concept of time is rendered obsolete by the sheer power of entertainment. You're about to enter the Boggis Hour. Of the Boggis Hour, Greg Boggis.
Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting episode of the Boggis Hour. I talked to an old friend of mine, a comedian, actor, and an author of the book Hot Chocolate for the Mind, Dwayne Perkins. How's it going, Dwayne?
Hey, Greg. Oh, it's going great, man, and it's good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. First of all, get the important stuff out of the way. What's the temperature out in LA right now?
Today I feel like it was it's a cold day for us, 60s maybe.
Oh
70s.
yeah, okay. So I think we're at about 15, 20 degrees right now. So
Yeah, it was 61 degrees at 2 p.m.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So winter was slow in getting here, and now it's finally here. So
yeah, I don't miss winter. I would like to say I do, but I really don't.
Yeah, it's funny. That's one of those things where you do have to think about it. And as a big sweaty guy, I don't mind winter. So.
Oh wow! Yeah. Okay.
So we started doing stand-up right around the same time. I started in 1994, and I'm trying to think of when were you just before that?
Around the same time, actually. I mean, I'm from New York City, so I did a few open mics before I moved up to Boston, and I moved up to Boston in '94.
Okay.
And, late '94. Fall of '94, I moved to Boston, and then hit the ground running. Yeah.
What brought you to Boston in '94?
I came there to work, actually. People always think I came to school, but I came there to work. First digital, then compact.
Oh, okay. So you're a digital compact guy,
Yeah.
techie guy. So when did you start? It sounded like you started doing stand-up comedy as soon as you moved to Boston.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of really getting into it, where I still had a full-time job, but when I started to do it more than once a month, a few times a week, was in Boston. That's where I got my legs.
Yeah.
I feel it was not Linda Birch. The name will come back to me. I think it was Linda Birch, actually, who called me one day. She's a comic from a Boston comic from back then. And she just told me she wanted to make sure I was still doing it. And she encouraged me to go up 4 times a week. And that became sort of my barometer.
Yeah.
And so I would run into you and Gary Goldman, and we'd be hitting all the spots,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Comedy Vault, Dick Doherty's Comedy Vault was one of my favorite little rooms. And I don't know if you know, but that's not there anymore. The building got bought by Emerson College, and so so I think it's some sort of college function now, but it's no longer the Dick Doherty room. So that's another little piece of history gone.
I was all about black guy. What's his name? Rodney, maybe. It'll come to me, but man, that's a bit of history right there.
Yeah. So, who were your early inspirations in comedy?
Well, it's like there's 2 types of inspirations as I see it. There's like your heroes who you sort of like aspire to be, and who you never meet, and actually sometimes you do meet them, but when you're first starting.
Sure.
Then there's guys who you start with. Then there's guys who are a little bit ahead of you who inspire you. So sort of like the comics I looked up to before I started were like George Carlin mainly, Eddie Murphy of course, and you know, Cosby. You know, I don't know if you can say that anymore, but definitely Cosby.
Yeah,
And,
sure. No, I mean, you know, whatever is happening to him now, I still don't think you can deny the history that he had as a performer, and he was certainly an incredibly groundbreaking performer in his, you know, broad cross-cultural appeal. I think that he was an incredible, you know,
Exactly.
I don't think that what's going on now, you know, negates what he did, you know, as a performer, as a person maybe, you know, as a human, you might put some bad line on him, but as an entertainer, he was one of the greats, you know, and certainly somebody to emulate. He was like one of those classic, like, you know, storyteller and character guys, and that's not an easy thing to do. You know, when you do comedy, you realize that telling a story
absolutely
is tough because you gotta sew it with enough punchlines in order to make the story good, or make the end punchline enough of a killer joke that the rest of the story is worth listening to.
You know, I never tried to be like him, other than maybe I was clean, and I'm still pretty clean, and I was a natural storyteller, but I never actively tried to be like Cosby. I think Carlin was the one I tried to, especially after I started doing it more and more. Carlin was the guy I looked to for like specific inspiration.
Right.
What people don't know is he was so dynamic that Richard Pryor copied him the first 8 years of his career. You know, and that's how crazy the legacy is. But
sure.
And then when I moved to Boston, was when I was introduced to, because you know, when I moved to Boston, I had an opportunity to maybe go to Arizona, and I know I wanted to do comedy, and I didn't know any comics from Arizona. I mean, turns out I think David Spade is from there, maybe Gary Shandling, but
yeah.
I knew of none then. But I knew Jay Leno was from Boston. I knew Conan was from Boston. So, you know, I picked Boston, and when I got there, I met the guys who were a little bit ahead of me, like ahead of us, Bill Burr, Dane,
Patrice O'Neill, sure.
Yeah, those guys really inspired me. You, Gary, and then the Boston legends, the guys who are like on the Mount Rushmore of Boston.
Donovan, Sweeney, Gavin.
Yes. So
Lenny.
Like I couldn't. Yeah, there's no better place for comedy than Boston. You know, I feel.
Yeah, and that group of guys just ahead of us. Talk about, like you said, you know, Patrice O'Neill, Dane Cook, Al Del Benny, Billy Burr. I mean,
Burr. Yeah.
There's some really powerhouse performers. You know, they've definitely.
Absolutely. And I feel like ahead of them, you could. I don't know if Louis C.K. counts, but he's from Boston. I feel. Yeah. And there's a lot. Yeah. So
yeah, he's probably a little bit before them, I think, as far as the class that he's from. But yeah, he was definitely another one of the newer, younger guys that came up on the scene.
Yeah, Chris McGuire. So Boston is just. I mean, since then, other cities have sort of come up. Minnesota, you know, Seattle's a big comedy town. Austin, but I think Boston remains like a great place to start. That's what I tell people.
It is interesting around here watching, you know, because back then it was essentially Boston was the hub, and all of the comedy kind of centered out from there. Now each state has developed their own, you know, indigenous comedy scene. So there's a whole, you know, comedy scene in Vermont, New Hampshire. You know, New Hampshire obviously bleeds into Massachusetts, and Maine. You know, so it's neat watching all these different places develop their own, you know, comedy world, their comedy scene.
Right, and I was there when like the alt scene in Boston was taking off, and that was
the studio.
I did that as well. That was great about Boston is that in LA it's more like you are really whatever style you do or people think you do, you tend to do those rooms over and over again, and there's not as much overlap. Whereas in Boston, you could do an alt room, a mainstream room, a room that was an hour away, that was more like being in the Midwest or something like that, even though it was New England. So Boston, just a great, and it's just sad that I'm not from there, because I don't get to come back quite as much as I would like to.
Yeah, we definitely miss seeing you around here. So, so when did you start getting into acting?
You know, it happens in Boston. It's sort of like when you're doing comedy, people say you got to ready yourself in case these other opportunities come, which you do and you don't. I mean, in a way you do, because comedy doesn't pay what it used to, but in a way you don't. But but
Ain't that the
my
truth?
my first official, I took a few acting lessons with some guys I found in the phone book, literally in Worcester, and it's like they ran acting classes out of their living room, you know, and then they were cool. Then after that, I actually Robert Kelly hooked me up with a guy, my first official acting teacher, Peter Kelly, and
Oh yeah, sure. I took a
yeah,
class with him back in the day.
yeah, and I still work with him sometimes in LA. He still bounces around from LA to Boston to New York. So that's when it first started. And then when I moved to LA, you realize the hustle out here is everyone's trying to create their own vehicle. So, you know, it really expanded my horizons in terms of writing and acting, and, you know, for better or for worse.
Sure. Yeah, I remember the first commercial I saw you in. I don't know, it was like watching Meet the Press on a Sunday, and it was a pretty long one. It was like a minute-long commercial. It was for Archie Daniels, but I can't remember what it was. But it was a really cool commercial.
That was GE. I went to Africa for that one.
Yeah, yeah, I remember it was like, oh yeah, that was a big production. Watching that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a nice commercial to do. And you get it's neat you do those, and you get the acting experience. You know what I mean? You realize that acting it's tough and it's not. You know what I mean? Like the nice thing about it is that, you know, unlike stand-up comedy where you literally have to perform at that very moment because you're in front of the crowd. You know, acting, you screw up, things happen environmentally, you can redo it, and so there's a little bit of pressure taken off you as opposed to, you know, being on live stage or live TV.
I think that's true, and you can get notes. The only bad thing is that depending on how close the camera is, it captures everything. And you have to sort of like know that when it feels like you're doing nothing, the camera is picking up something because it picks up what you. Like when you're doing comedy, people see what you do. The camera sees what you think. So you have to make sure your thoughts are in the right place, and that's not always easy. But
yeah, there's a couple of times having done this show where I'm talking to somebody and I realize, oh man, my mind is actually not with what they're saying, and now I've got to try to recouple. And I'm almost wondering, does your face give that away? Like, can the person you're talking to say, this guy's not paying attention to me?
Completely. Like the camera is the best poker player in the world. You know what I mean? It captures everything. So acting is fun. I mean, I still love stand-up the most. You know, but acting is fun. And like, you know, that commercial I did, the one you just said, the GE commercial. Commercials, because they're big companies, they cost more than movies. Like that commercial probably costs way more than any of the movies I've done. This is it's crazy that they could spend more for a 30-second or minute-long thing.
Well, what a lot of people don't realize too is that, you know, very, very big name directors do commercials. And that's kind of like that's something you can go and make a nice paycheck, you know, for a relatively short period of time. And so in between doing a big production, you can go and actually, you know, rake in some coins. So you end up working with, you know, people that you would not expect to be directing a commercial for whatever, you know.
Absolutely. I think that's the number one thing I think that would surprise you about actors, directors, writers, especially actors and directors though. The amount of things they do for either a quick check or for the love. So like for every project that a big time director might do, a big time actor might do, that's just sort of like he's sneaking away and getting a little bit of money. It'll be shown in another market or something, or, you know, for every one of those, there's something that they do that maybe they're getting no money for, but they just want to do it.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
So you've done some screenwriting and writing for
Yeah. Well, the latest movie I did, Dying to Kill, which is almost finished, and going to go to festivals and whatnot. I co-wrote that. So yeah, I write with different people. Usually I co-write my screenplays, but I've written several.
Yep.
One I was hired to write, but it didn't get made. Another one I wrote that I made with some friends. We raised the funds and produced it. And then there's a bunch of others that are, intellectual property that are, hopefully will find a home.
Sure, sure. Yeah, you realize that a lot of it is just continuing to, produce and pour out, that there's... Remember...
That's exactly right.
Vincent Price talked about, somebody said, well, how can we do some of these, these low-budget, crappy movies? He's like, well, not everything is going to be Lawrence of Arabia. You've got to do all these different things, and you're still involved in the process. And even though, it may not be the greatest thing, you're still actually, getting some value out of it.
Right. Comedy-wise, it's like when we came up and we would, you always wanted to do Nick or Comic Connection, but in the interim, you had to do The Vault.
Sure.
Or to do
the Middle East.
Stuff. Right, exactly. So, yeah, I think it's all about staying busy. And the crazy thing is, you hear a lot of stories about Hollywood, and some of them are super exaggerated. Like you hear things like, this guy came in and he didn't know any of the lines, and he just, there's always these stories about someone being bold and taking a big risk and it working out well. Normally, that's not how it works. You come in, you do what they ask you to do. Like they always say, what's his name? John Ratzenberger, the guy who played Cook Craven.
Yep.
Like he walked in a room and created that character, and he's like, "Do you guys have this kind of character?" If that happens, it happened way down the process. He didn't just walk in and create a character that they put on in the show. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I say all that to say, one thing is true that happens in Hollywood. My experience is that you go in to pitch a project. It's the one you've really worked hard at making sure you know how to sell it. You pitch it to them, and they're always like, "Oh, okay, not too bad. What else you got?" And then you're like, "Well, that's like 80% of the time. It's the second thing you pitch. That's why you have to have a lot of things, just because it's the thing you throw out there that they just might attach themselves to,
right?
And that's what that gets sold, that gets made. Yeah.
Sure.
So that's so it's all about this. You can't be in love with any one project. But it's like a joke. A lot of it is analogous to comedy, where you think a joke is great and it might be great, but if it's not working for whatever reason, you just put it aside. You don't throw it away totally. Bring it back later. It might work then.
Sure.
And while you're waiting, you write new jokes or more jokes. You know what I mean? So he's a great teacher for all these things.
So, by the way, some Star Wars trivia. John Ratzenberger, if you know, was in The Empire Strikes Back. He was actually
is that right?
He was one of the rebels on the ice planet.
Yes, I think I knew that. Yeah, that's great.
So now I want to ask you about you've also got a book.
I have a book.
Hot
by
Chocolate.
The way, the new Star Wars is my favorite, by the way. Hot Chocolate for the Mind.
It was good. It was quite good. It hasn't become my favorite, but it's good.
It was my favorite as soon as I walked out of the theater. Yeah, and I have a movie. I actually review movies every week on my podcast called The Movie Night. So you ever in LA? You got to be a guest. If you're in LA, you got to come. Yeah. But my book is called Hot Chocolate for the Mind. It's available on Amazon and all various formats. It's an ebook. Basically, I wrote. I had a blog over a 10-year period, and so I collected the best essays from the blog and compiled them into a book.
Nice. So, how many essays are in the book?
I don't know how many essays, but I know it's about 70,000 words, so it's quite a bit.
Wow. And how many years was that compiled over?
About I would say 8 to 10.
Okay,
10 years maybe.
So that's a pretty good body of work. Cool.
Oh yeah, and there were enough things that did not make the book to make another book if I ever wanted to.
Great.
So,
So
and
I've got to do that.
people like,
I've got to keep an eye out for your new movie. Is there anything else that you have working on that we can see soon? You're going to shoot Are you going to shoot an album? Is that coming up?
Special, actually.
You did.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the process of being sold, called Take Note. Like that's a play on words. Take notes. Take note. Take note of me. Take notes of what I'm writing.
Right,
that
right.
special is done, and I don't know where it's gonna live yet, but it should find a home pretty soon.
Cool.
And it'll be on my website, and I have 2 podcasts: the movie night and a new one called Off the Top.
And that's about?
I just ramble for half an
I like that.
off the top of my head. I
Nice.
just ramble for half an hour. So, these are the outlets where I disseminate information and just connect with people. Mainly website, all information can be found. And this year, it's tough because I want people to look for things. I don't know where to tell them to look yet, but it's all coming.
Google your name. So before we go, I want to ask you my usual 3 questions is your best show that you can recall doing. And, you don't have to, you can pick one. Sometimes there's a lot of them.
Right. You mean,
for stand-up.
Yeah.
Your best stand-up show.
There's been a few. Oh, boy. I think I did one somewhere on Route 9 in Boston. It was a comedy class that I didn't take, but I was the headliner, the professional headliner, and I was barely a professional, but I just slayed. And I would say it's one of my best shows only because it not only was the show a really good show, but it was sort of like a changing of the guard, because from amateur to officially being a pro.
Right, sure. Yeah, moving on up, as it would be. Okay, now your worst show.
Also in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
It was in Worcester, somewhere on Main Street. I can't remember the name of the place, but it basically remember getting, I think, I want to say 0 laughs, maybe 0.1 laughs, maybe 0.5, but I do half an hour, and I couldn't get crowd work going. I just half an hour, and I didn't. Usually we can dig ourselves out of a hole, and I didn't dig myself out of a hole, but I did do the time.
Yeah, there's nothing like that, boy. It's like time is going through molasses. Just
It was a half an hour, so imagine that. For people who don't do comedy, a half an hour of bombing.
That's a long time.
Like 2 weeks.
Oh,
like 2
yeah.
weeks.
And how about the most unusual show?
Most unusual. There's been so many of those, but I would say in Afghanistan, performing for the troops. We did a show outside on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Very dangerous place.
Very hostile. Not conducive for good comedy.
The helicopter had to leave us there. And it was outside. They didn't have a mic. Someone came up with the bright idea to make us stand on like this pedestal, and where our heads were peering over that wall. and then we started hearing, during the show, we could hear gunshots with our head over the wall.
Oh, no, that's not good.
And they told us it was from fire, whatever. But yeah, doing comedy with gunshots in the background. So then a helicopter was late coming back, and actually we got diverted, so we couldn't go back to the original base and went to a different base. We were supposed to go back to not Kabul, Bagram, but we got like diverted to Kandahar. It was really scary.
Wow. Well, hey, appreciate you coming on the Boggis Hour. Just it's always a pleasure to talk and see you. You've always been one of my guys that I went up with that I've always admired a lot because you're funny and you're a decent guy. And as you know,
Thank you, Greg.
It's very tough to do in comedy.
And I appreciate you, your comedy, and I feel like you hooked me up with some tires once, and
Oh yeah, that's right. I worked for NTB. I sold tires. Cool. Well,
that,
good luck in your next book. Good luck in your movie, and yeah, make your way back to New Hampshire and Boston, and
absolutely.
we'll be glad to see you. So, Dwayne Perkins, comedian, live from LA on the Boggis Hour. Thanks a lot.
I'll see you soon, man.
Cheers. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the Boggis Hour, email us here at thebogishour@gmail.com.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.